Let me take a moment and remind you of what Matthew 7:24 through 27 says. Everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and yet it did not fall, because it had its foundation on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell with a great crash. In the previous video, we talked about two comparisons between the two builders of Matthew 7 and us. If you remember, the first one was that they were building a home, a life, a heritage, a legacy. And second, they both faced the same storms. We too face storms in life, intent on taking us down. Today, I want us to consider a third comparison. Jesus is giving us this comparison between these two builders. You see, both men went to the same Bible school. They sat in the same class, listened to the same professor teaching the same Bible lesson. You see, Jesus said that they both heard his words. Both these men chose to be open to God's truth. Please understand, Jesus isn't saying that the wise man had a love for hearing God's truth while the foolish man had utter contempt for it. No, both of these men heard God's word. Both of them sought it out. Both men knew the value of what God had to say, and both of these men listened to what God was saying. Both of them gave careful consideration to what they heard, and they both understood how it applied to them. Unfortunately, here's where the comparisons end. Here is where the men take two totally different paths. Here's where the sole singular contrast makes one a wise man and the other man foolish. See, although they were both building their life, although they both faced the same storm, and although they both heard God's word, the fundamental difference between these two was the foundation that they chose to build on. One chose obedience to God's word. The other did not. Jesus is saying that the wise man built his house upon the rock. He immediately applied God's word to his own heart and life. And he did what God was instructing him to do. But the foolish man, he built his house on the sand. He heard and he understood what God wanted from him, but he chose to ignore it. According to Luke chapter 6, verse 48, the wise man didn't simply set his house on that rock. He dug deep into it. Guys, obedience requires effort. It calls for discipline. Remember, the wise man of Matthew 7, he wasn't able to rent a 385 cat excavator. He didn't have access to a pneumatic jackhammer with alloy steel forgings and a 4-bolt backhead design. He couldn't even find a stick of dynamite. He had to use a chisel and a hammer in sheer brute force. It takes work to build into that rock. It requires time and energy, and it costs. Let's face it, it's always easier to take shortcuts in a building project. You save money when you use inferior materials, right? And for a while, nobody notices the shoddy work. But somewhere along the line, there is a price to be paid. It also takes less time and energy to maintain a superficial faith. And to be honest, who'll be able to tell the difference? It's definitely easier to just show up for church for an hour a week, let the worship leader and the pastor fill you with warm fuzzies, and then go on your way. It's less demanding on your day to just open a daily devotional booklet and read the couple of verses that are there, and then read the writer's comments. Close it up and go on your way with your day. The question that I want you to consider is this: are you doing the Word? Are you moment by moment, day by day, choosing to do what God says? If you construct your life according to Christ's building codes, if you dig deep into solid rock, guys, you will never, ever be disappointed.